What time is it? It's nation time.
Greetings and welcome to the AfterWords program. I'm Baba Kafense, your host. I'm joined today by Bishop Dijanaba Akita, this week's preacher of our sermon, Use the Power. Welcome to the AfterWords program, Bishop. How are you today?
Doing well. Thank you for having me again.
I love the smile, and it's good to see you on this lovely day. The scripture for today's sermon comes from the book of Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, verse 5, and it reads, "Thus says the Lord God to these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live again." And you summon us, you challenge us, you urge us, as you always do. You give us a charge. And this week is use the power. But what is this power you're talking about? Where is this power? I mean, tell us what the power is.
That is a great question. You know, many times when we have problems or issues, we sometimes look for answers outside of ourselves. Try to look to an entity, a company, or a person outside of ourselves to solve our situation or to resolve our problems. But what I contend to say is that we all have an inner power, inner strength that's given to us at birth, an inner divinity that allows us to do co-creating things. When I say co-creating, I mean we can create ideas, we can create solutions, we can create institutions, we can create programs that aid our benefit, that enhance our community, that strengthen our community. And if we don't use the power, it's like having a lamp. A lamp does no good unless you plug it into the electric, to let the electricity move through it. You can have a flashlight, but if you don't turn it on, it's just an empty instrument. So we have power within us to do certain things.
And I really like the concept, but I'm curious, what would you say? Many of us that grew up in the more Western traditional church are taught, we're nothing, or, we're born in sin and disconnected from God. But you use the term co-creators, and you talked about the power within us. So what do you say to those of us that have no idea about the power of God within us and how we can be co-creators of our reality, working in concert with God?
And I'm so glad you asked that, because that was the things that I was speaking of when I was saying how we have different instances where we do the miraculous. When you talk about miracles that appear in the Bible, there's stories of how people overcame different obstacles. And we have miracles in our own lives that occur, but we don't look at it that way because we are so used to being in a diminished capacity, where we're thought that the things that we do don't really matter, that they are not really as important as, say, some things that are done by other people. But we have that ability. I reflect back on the creativity of my grandmother, how she could take a simple meal and make it into a masterpiece to the point. I kind of joke when I say that she would have meals for the pastor. When you brought the pastor of your church to your house, you were taking a chance because you didn't want to be the subject of a illustration that was not favorable. But the fact that she would lay out this spread and people would come by and the pastor would come by, or you could have a gathering where it was too many people to fit at the main table, but it didn't matter to you, just as long as you got a plate. And that's the simplest little thing. She had this little brown ceramic bowl and she would whip up everything. And I was like, how does she make these meals, these delicacies come to life? And it was her energy, her love that she put into it. And we all have that same inner ability to produce the miraculous things, but we just have to be aware of them.
And we have to see it for what it really is. I
Yes.
think what you're saying is, we may think of it as a simple thing, but it really is that power working within us.
God works through us, not for us. You know, when we have the ability to think of different things and come up with different innovations, you think about all the creativity that we as a people have demonstrated over the centuries. You know, how else can you explain the fact that we could rise out of enslavement and then create institutions that, even though they weren't necessarily established for our benefit, we use them for our benefit? You know, the fact that we had HBCUs that were done in to supposedly level the playing field, but we took them to a whole nother level.
Time and time again, it was 180,000 Black men that joined the the Union Army to help achieve that victory. I mean, our history is replete with examples of us using that power, that God power working through us. You also talk about briefly the concept of being blocked and how it can cause us to languish or separate us. And I even think the idea of being blocked can inhibit our ability to effectively use our power. So what do you mean by blocked, and how do we get unblocked?
Well, I think we're blocked because we buy into the negative narratives that have been associated with us as a people. We tell ourselves that we can't do it. We tell ourselves that our communities cannot be innovative because we have been forced to live in areas that are in disrepair. But they're in disrepair not because of our innate lack of ability, but because it's been designed that way. You know, when you go into a neighborhood that is in disrepair, you say this must be the underserved neighborhood. But why is it underserved? Because resources are not being invested in that community. And then we begin to think that this is the way that we're supposed to live. And we're blocked by, you know, just the failure to have current information that uplifts us as a people. You know, the whole movement to diminish the importance of Black people or Black history is an assault on us, and that blocks our ability to understand and believe in ourselves. So what we have to do is we have to take control of the narrative. We have to tell our own stories. We have to promote ourselves. We have to believe in ourselves. You know, when we talk about supporting Black businesses and Black entrepreneurs, and they say, well, you know, why is it so much? Why are their costs more than the other people's costs? Well, what we have to understand is that the system is set up so that they have to pay more and they have to get more investment. But that doesn't mean that we can't support ourselves. We have almost $1 trillion in income, but we don't use it for our own benefit. We use it for other people's benefit.
Yeah, you also mentioned that the decision to serve God requires that one prepare themselves for an ordeal. And say a little about the concept of service to God, because I think many of us think it means, okay, if I go to church, if I pray, if I pay my tithes, but what's the ordeal in that? So how is the idea of serving God different, and why should we be prepared for an ordeal?
Well, we had to prepare ourselves for an ordeal because just because we say we're going to work for righteousness or we're going to do something that's positive doesn't mean we're not going to be met with defiance. You know, when we look at different issues that are being implemented today, Project 2025, where they're taking away programs that help the poor, that benefit poor people. And we say, well, why is that being playing a prominent role in society today? Don't they understand that people need food, that people need these services? But that's not the point. The point is their ability to maintain and control power. And we have to understand that we have to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, because when you build something for yourself, no one can take it from you. When you create your own garden, you could control the what you eat. We can't control the prices they have in the supermarket, but if we grow our own, then we have access to those things that we need for ourselves.
I'm reminded of the words from that song. Nobody said the road would be easy. In closing, could you briefly talk about how the programs of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church prepare us to use this power that you talk about in today's sermon?
One of the things that we do here in terms of our programs is that we have recognized that our children need to be educated. So we have institutions like that, the Atlanta Learning Center, where we work with children as young as 2 years old and teach them how to read, teach them how they have a connection with their culture and heritage. We also have the World of Akibaland, our online ministry that works with young people to develop STEM skills. We have programs such as the African history class that is viewed online. We have Enter the Black Hole here in Houston. We have different entities that are working on a regular basis to create that space where we can not only encourage ourselves, but we can promote other Black institutions that are working collaboratively with us for the sake of liberating African people around the world. So we're not sitting idly by waiting for somebody else to do it. We understand that we're the ones who have the power to do it. And so we're taking steps to make sure that happens and to create a legacy for those who come behind us, to let them know that it doesn't have to be just something in the past, but it's something we can do in the present that will prepare us for the future.
Thank you, Bishop, for a very spiritually invigorating sermon and an equally engaging discussion here in the AfterWords platform. I'd like to thank you very much for your continuous work and commitment, and I'd like to invite our audience to continue to join us on Sunday mornings at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time for our weekly sermons and the engaging discussion that follows. And I'd like to close with the words of our patron saint, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Up, you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will.
And we shall live again.
What time is it? It's nation time.